Hello, welcome to my video tutorial about how I made my Chun-Li bracelets. This is a small and straightforward project with a small twist to make it so that the bracelets are more screen accurate. Her bracelets in most references are really thick but tight around her wrist, yet do not slide up and down her arms when she poses. If made purely with foam, they'd be impossible to get over your hands. Unless you installed some sort of hinge or magnet system, which seems like a pain in the booty, so I don't wanna. The bases are made out of 10mm craft foam cut into 2.5 by 14.5 rectangles, or 6 centimeters by 37 centimeters for all you non-Americans out there. I used a box cutter to cut out the shapes. You should probably do this on a cutting mat and not on the carpet like I do in the video. The size could also be adjusted for your preferences or wrist size. I wanted mine large and cartoony because that's how I interpret her references. Next, I used a heat gun to seal the foam and also to shape it into circles to prepare for the barge cement. To help with shaping them into circles, I pinned the ends together. After heat blasting the bases into remotely the shape of circles, I unpinned and thoroughly covered the connecting ends in barge cement. I did not use gloves, but you should, because this stuff is toxic AF. Wait a few minutes for the cement to dry and then carefully connect the ends as least sloppily as you can possibly manage, which in my case is still always a bit sloppy. If the edges don't line up perfectly because you, like me, also suck at cutting a straight line, you can Dremel that edge down smoother, which I'm pretty sure I do off camera. At this point, after you are certain that the glue is dry and the connection is solid, you can also reshape the circles into being more circly. Next, you should measure your bases, width, and circumference. You're going to use these measurements to cut out 2 more rectangles with 2mm craft foam. These are going to go over the bases at a later point. For this next part, you're going to need 4-way stretch spandex and a finish that will match whatever black paint you plan on using. I'm going to use a glossy black paint to finish my bracelets, so I chose a glossy black spandex. If you're going to use a matte paint, pick a matte spandex. Cut 4 squares with this spandex approximately the size of your circle bases. This fabric is going to be stretched over the ends of your bases, where your arms will go through. The next step is attaching the spandex to the bases. I hot glued all along the outside edges of the bases, and then pulled the spandex taut in all directions like a drum so the surface is smooth. The goal should be for the top and top edges to be smooth, so you can't tell it's fabric at first glance. You might have to unpull the glue and re-pull and re-glue in a few places to get it perfect. After you get the fabric adequately smooth, you're going to want to cut a hole into the surface, one that is slightly smaller than your wrist. You want it to be tight enough that it grips your wrist and doesn't slide, but not tight enough that there's a bunch of fabric visibly bunching on your wrist. Start small and gradually make it larger so you don't accidentally make it too big and have to start over. The ending hole should be kind of like an oval, just slightly smaller than your wrist. Then you can cut off all the excess spandex off the sides. Try to get it as smooth as possible, but it doesn't have to be perfect because it'll be covered by foam later. Just try to get rid of any bulk, essentially. Repeat this process on the other side and the other base as well. Next up is making spikies. I made a little cone pattern via trial and error out of paper to figure out the exact size and angle I wanted. Once you have your little cone pattern, trace 12, or more in case you make mistakes, of them onto 2mm craft foam and carefully cut them out. You could also opt to make your spikies out of foam clay if you wanted them to be a little sturdier, but I wanted my spikies to be super uniform in size, so I opted for using a paper pattern and 2mm craft foam. Next, it's time to transform them into cones. Cover the straight edges with contact cement and let them dry for a while. Don't be like me, use gloves. After they dry, now it's time to bend them into cones by sticking the glued edges together. It becomes impossible towards the top, but try your best as possible to line the edges up. We can fix it later if it's imperfect. I also applied some hot glue reinforcement on the inside of the seams. After the spike army is assembled, you can Dremel out any obvious imperfections in the seams. You don't have to use a Dremel, you can use any kind of sanding tool to smooth it out. Next, pin the thin rectangles from earlier to the outside of your bases. You could use a small amount of glue instead if you don't want pin marks as well, but make sure it's enough that it can easily come off again without ripping the foam. After that, I marked where I wanted my 6 spikes to go. I didn't measure, I just eyeballed it, but it could be done with measuring if you want it to be super accurate. Next, put 6 circles of contact cement on the base, approximately the size of the base of your cones, where your spikes are going to go. After coating the bases of your cones in cement, wait a little bit and then attach the 6 of them to your base. Since the cones are thin, make sure the base is shaped as roundly as possible when you go to press them onto the bracelet base. Also make sure the seams all face the same way. I picked the side of my base that was uglier so that it can be less visible in pictures. Next, remove the outer layers. We are doing this to paint them separately so we don't get spray paint all over the fabric. Make sure to heat seal these cone strips with a heat gun before the next step. Then, go out to your creepy garage and seal the strips with black spray Plastidip. It can be any color, but I think the black goes on the smoothest. I did one very thorough coat, waited about 30 minutes, and then did another very thorough coat. You could also seal it with Mod Podge or another flexible foam sealer. Then after that was dry, I gave it a few coats of silver spray paint. After that, I think if you're not on a time crunch, you should probably wait about a day for everything to dry just so you don't mess up the finish when you move on to the next step. The next step is to permanently apply the outside straps to the bases. I only glued towards the edges and the middles, but you can use as much glue as you'd like. Apply it carefully and cut off any excess if needed. Next is time to paint it black. Just paint and avoid the spikes in the fabric. Keep a Q-tip on hand in case you accidentally get some on a spike. This took me 3 layers of acrylic paint for it to appear perfectly opaque. Make sure to get the foam edges as well. Ta-da! Now you have Chun-Li bracelets that don't play slip and slide on your arm. If you like this tutorial, please give me a thumbs up so I know you want to see more like this. Thanks for watching!